Sam Cooke, just a week before his untimely death, pulled Lou Rawls aside and told him something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. For decades, Lou kept those words locked away, carrying the weight of a secret that tied him forever to Sam's fate. Now at 72, he finally breaks the silence. What did Sam say that shook Lou so deeply, and why is he choosing to reveal it only now? Stay with us to know the surprising details. Voices born in the same choir. At 72, Lou Rawls sat back and let his memory drift to the streets of Chicago, where his story with Sam Cooke began. The years had taken him far from those early days, but when he spoke about them, you could almost hear the echo of the church bells and the gospel harmonies that shaped his soul. Chicago in the 40s and 50s was alive with music that came from the pews, not the radio. For black families like his, church was more than worship. It was the heartbeat of the community. Rawls grew up in those choirs, a boy among men with booming voices and women who carried high notes like prayers sent straight to heaven. He remembered watching Sam Cooke for the first time in that same world. Sam was only a teenager then, thin but confident, with a smile that made people stop and pay attention. Lou would later say, Sam had a way when he lifted his voice in that church. You'd feel it all over, like it was meant for more than Sunday. Both boys moved through the gospel circuit that crisscrossed Chicago. Cooke found his place with the Highway QCs, a young group already gaining a reputation for their polished harmonies. Lou joined in with local groups, sometimes filling in for friends, sometimes standing back in awe. By the early 50s, Sam's talent had carried him to the Soul Stirrers, one of the most famous gospel groups in the country. Lou, still chasing his own voice, sang with the Highway QCs until 1953. It was in those years that their paths truly began to intertwine. Lou remembered one rehearsal as if it had been carved into his memory. The church was nearly empty, the air heavy with the smell of candle wax. Sam stayed behind after everyone else had gone. Lou slipped back in to fetch his coat and found him singing alone, barely louder than a whisper, but every note floated like a secret prayer. You could tell he was talking to the heavens. Lou recalled, shaking his head softly, as if still hearing the sound. That moment told Lou something important. He could not outsing Sam in that high gospel lift, no matter how hard he tried. His own voice was lower, rougher, with the grit of swing and blues creeping in. At first, he tried to copy Sam to reach those same soaring notes, but in time, he embraced the difference. I had to find my own lane, Lou admitted. Sam was reaching up, I was reaching down. And maybe that is what made us both strong. Family members who sat in the pews back then still talk about those Sundays, when the two young men were side by side, chasing the same dream without yet knowing where it would lead. But that early admiration had a cost. Let's tell you what Rawls reveals about the rivalry that simmered behind the harmony, one that almost broke their friendship. Through gospel to pop, influence versus jealousy. Sam Cooke's move from the gospel world into secular music was more than a career shift. It was a cultural earthquake. He had been the shining star of the Soul Stirrers, drawing people into church halls with a voice that seemed to wrap prayer in velvet. But when he stepped into the world of pop with You Send Me in 1957, he broke from tradition. For many gospel purists, it was betrayal. For others, it was courage. Lou Rawls, still walking the gospel path at that time, watched carefully. He admired Sam's bravery, but also felt the weight of what it meant to leave behind the safety of the pulpit and take the voice of Sunday morning into the Friday night clubs. Rawls once said in an interview, "We worshiped together, then we watched each other walk out of the church door with different dreams. He to carry the gospel in song, I to carry life in any tune that felt honest." That sense of shared roots but divergent journeys haunted him. Like Sam, Rawls carried gospel in every note, using vocal runs, phrasing, and that deep emotional delivery born of church choirs. When people heard Rawls, they often heard the echo of Cooke, and that shadow was both a blessing and a burden. One of the defining moments came when Rawls sang backing vocals on Cooke's Bring It On Home to Me. Standing behind Sam in the studio, Rawls learned the power of restraint. He was not the star of that recording, but his voice gave the song its texture. Later, he admitted, "That day, I learned what it meant to support another man's light, but it also made me hungry for my own." For Rawls, it was both inspiration and frustration, watching his friend shine while he held the harmony. Hidden within those years were moments Rawls never spoke about until much later. He confessed that after one of his early solo shows, a reviewer wrote that Lou Rawls had the best Sam Cooke impression in town. Rawls clipped that review and kept it for years. He said, "Every time someone said I sounded like Sam, it felt like praise and curse all in one." It stung because he wanted to be remembered as Lou, not as a shadow of another man's genius. There were also raw moments backstage when Sam, half teasing and half serious, told him, "Lou, you got the same tools I got. Don't just copy the house I built, build your own." Those words stayed with Rawls. He respected Sam, even idolized him at times, but he also knew he had to step out of that comparison if he wanted to survive in the industry. The rivalry was never hostile, but it was real. Audiences and critics often placed them side by side. Some fans cheered Rawls for sounding like Cooke, while others dismissed him for the same reason. It left Lou caught between admiration and jealousy, between pride and hurt. His friendship with Sam was layered with unspoken competition, the kind that only two men from the same soil could understand. But the rivalry wasn't just artistic. Beyond the stage and spotlight lay secrets that Rawls kept for more than half his life. Let's tell you about moments that changed both men forever. Tragedies and turning points. In 1958, the road turned dark for Lou Rawls and Sam Cooke. Touring the South with the Pilgrim Travelers, their car was struck in a crash so violent it nearly ended both of their lives. Rawls later told, "They pronounced me dead in the ambulance but rushed me to the operating. For days, no one knew if he would wake up. He had suffered severe head trauma, slipped into a coma, and hovered between life and death." Sam Cooke was also injured, badly shaken but alive. His career briefly paused at the very moment it was beginning to soar. The physical toll on Rawls was immense. He had to relearn balance, speech, and even how to trust his body again. But the emotional scar ran deeper. In interviews years later, Rawls said, "That time laid me flat, not just in bed, but in spirit. I felt mortal in a way I never had before. I asked myself if I was wasting my gift, if I was supposed to do more than just sing for the moment." That brush with death forced him into a reckoning. Hidden in those months of convalescence were small acts of kindness that Rawls carried for the rest of his life. Rawls later said Sam tried to keep strong for everyone else. He visited Lou in the hospital when he could, sometimes slipping in quietly, sometimes sending messages through the Pilgrim Travelers. Sam's presence was steady, but behind closed doors he confided to friends that he feared he might lose not only Lou, but the music family they had built together. A close associate recalled, "Sam carried that accident like a bruise. He didn't like to talk about it, but he would sometimes say, 'Man, that night, we could have all been gone.'" Though Cooke returned to singing sooner, Rawls felt he had been given time borrowed from fate. "When I came out of that fog," he once said, "I heard Sam's voice, still singing, still pushing. I felt I owed him something." Friends who visited him in the hospital remembered placing a radio by his bed so he could listen to Sam's records. He would close his eyes, the relative said, and it was like the music was calling him back. Doctors told Rawls it was a miracle he survived. For him, that miracle carried responsibility. In later interviews, journalists pressed him about whether the crash had changed how he saw Cooke. Rawls admitted, "After the crash, did I feel closer to Sam? Yes and no. I felt grateful to have him still in my life, but I also felt the distance of knowing that fate could take either of us any day. We were brothers in music, but sometimes that makes you hold things back instead of saying them outright." The accident became a turning point for Rawls. It slowed him down, but it also sharpened his desire to carve his own path, not just live in Sam's shadow. Surviving when he was expected to die filled him with determination, but also with a bitterness he rarely voiced. Healing came, but bitterness lingered. Rawls finally addresses the rumors, the guilt, and the unspoken words that haunted him. Guilt, regret, and what was never said. Though Lou Rawls talked openly about Sam Cooke in countless interviews, there were still corners of that friendship that he kept guarded. So he decided to open up finally, and when he spoke of Sam Cooke, his voice did not always carry the polish of a singer, but the ache of a man who wished he had done more. He admitted quietly, "Sometimes the songs get all the praise. The man behind them, less so. I wish I could have done more to see his name on the ledger." It was his way of confessing that while the world celebrated Sam's voice, not enough of them stood up for Sam's business fights, his struggles to keep ownership of his music, or the battles he waged for fairness in a ruthless industry. Rawls carried guilt for not standing closer to his friend when it mattered most. He remembered conversations where Sam laid out his vision of running his own label, signing artists, breaking free from contracts that trapped so many black performers. Lou admired it, but often stayed quiet. "I was younger. I was thinking of my own path. I didn't always speak up when I could have. Maybe I thought Sam was untouchable, that nothing could harm him." Then came Sam's sudden death in 1964, wrapped in rumors and unanswered questions. Rawls never publicly accused anyone, but he admitted the silence gnawed at him. Friends said he sometimes paused in the middle of interviews, struggling with whether to say more. In this late reflection, he confessed, "I wasn't there when he needed me, not the way a brother should be. I didn't push. I didn't demand more answers. And I carry that." A hidden detail he rarely shared was a private conversation only weeks before Sam's death. Lou remembered Sam sounding hopeful, not broken. He talked about the next chapter, about music that would cross every line. He was excited. That's what makes the end so hard to swallow. The silence after his voice left the room. That was the loudest thing I ever heard. Rawls also carried personal regrets outside of Sam's shadow. He admitted to wishing he had recorded more gospel, the music that had birthed them both. Commercial pressure, fear of being left behind in the charts, sometimes pulled him away from the songs of faith that still rang deepest in his heart. "There were nights I sang the pop songs, but in my head, I was hearing the old hymns. And I wonder if I let people down by not giving more of that side of me." Among his most personal confessions was a song he once wrote but never released, a quiet piece meant for Sam. He sang it once during a late-night show in Chicago, not announcing it, but those who were there felt the weight. One friend later said it sounded like a prayer. Rawls never recorded it, explaining, "Some songs are too close to the bone. That one belonged to me and Sam." As he grew older, Rawls spoke less about applause and more about legacy. At this age, the applause gets quieter, the days get shorter, but the truth, the real truth, it lasts after you've left the stage. "If people forget my voice, let them remember the man I tried to be next to Sam." When asked if he could say one last thing to Sam, Rawls looked down, holding the pause longer than the question. Finally, he said, "I'd tell him I believed in him more than I ever said, and I'd tell him I loved him like a brother. Sometimes we wait too long to say the simplest things." Yet Rawls also carried admiration alongside regret. Let's tell you how Sam Cooke influenced not just his singing, but his life, business, activism, even love. Influence beyond voice. Sam had a way of proving that an artist did not have to be just a voice on a stage. He could also be a businessman, a leader, and a man of principle. Rawls once explained, "He showed me you could sing your heart out and also insist on owning the heart." Sam's insistence on publishing rights and owning his recordings was radical for its time. Many artists in the 50s and 60s, especially black performers, were exploited by record companies, their royalties siphoned off, their names forgotten in contracts they never fully understood. Sam fought that. He started his own label, SAR Records, and demanded his worth. Rawls admitted that he had not always thought that way. "I was happy just to be heard," he confessed, "but Sam made me think about being paid, about being respected. Watching him, I started to realize the stage wasn't the only place you had to perform. The office, the contracts, the choices, those mattered just as much." Later in his career, Rawls applied those lessons, negotiating stronger deals and insisting on creative control, a path he might never have dared without Sam's example. Then there was the question of the voice beyond the microphone. Cooke's "A Change Is Gonna Come" became more than a song. It was a statement that echoed through churches, marches, and living rooms. For Rawls, it was a challenge. Sam wasn't just singing hits, Rawls reflected in a documentary. He was speaking up, negotiating his value, setting an example. I tried to follow that path stumbling, but trying. Lou admitted he was never as outspoken as Sam in political terms, but he carried that influence quietly into his own choices. He performed at benefit concerts, lent his name to causes, and used his presence to uplift community programs, especially in Chicago and Los Angeles. He knew Sam had laid that groundwork. A hidden detail surfaced in stories told by friends. Lou sometimes stepped into events Sam had first helped organize. There were benefit bookings that Sam had championed before his death, and Lou continued them. In one instance, Rawls carried the banner at a fundraiser for civil rights families, singing not only his own songs but also slipping in lines of Sam's as a tribute. He rarely announced it, but those close to him knew he was honoring the friend who had shown him what music could do beyond selling records. Even in his personal life, Sam's influence lingered. Lou admitted that he sometimes patterned his public charm on Sam's style. Sam could walk into a room and make everyone feel seen. I tried to carry myself that way, Rawls said. In matters of family, he remembered how Sam balanced a heavy career with responsibility to those around him. Lou said that when he became a father, he thought of Sam's tenderness with his own family, trying to follow that example. Rawls now admitted that his path was not perfect, but it was shaped by Sam Cooke in ways he could not measure. Sam gave him courage to claim his art, to think of legacy, to stand taller in a business that often wanted him small. "If I stumbled," Rawls said softly, "at least I was walking on the road Sam paved." Sam's impact loomed larger than just music, but as Rawls reaches age 72, he finally confronts the legacy gap. Legacy, memory, and misremembered stories. Lou Rawls' connection with Sam was real, carved into their shared history in Chicago's gospel scene, but the blending of their legacies sometimes blurred the truth. "Sometimes I'm asked to tell Sam's story," Rawls once admitted, "and sometimes my own gets lost in the telling." To him, it was a double-edged sword. He loved honoring his friend, but he longed for people to also see the man who carved his own place in music, not only as an echo of Sam. He remembered moments where strangers insisted he had written or sung certain Cooke classics. Some even credited him with "A Change Is Gonna Come," as if his voice and Sam's had melted into one. Lou never took offense, but the mix-up stung. "It's like people couldn't separate us," he said, as if my name was just a shadow following his. Yet in dusty boxes and reels, Lou sometimes uncovered proof of his own part in history. He spoke of finding old tapes, forgotten letters, even photographs where he and Sam had shared the stage. One such moment was his backing vocal on "Bring It On Home to Me." Though the world celebrated the song as pure Sam, Lou's voice had been there, weaving in the harmony. He often reflected that the recording taught him humility and frustration in equal measure. You want to shine, but sometimes history only shines its light one way. Archivists and music historians sometimes reached out to him later in life, hoping to clarify who sang what, who wrote which line, who stood in the studio during certain sessions. Rawls welcomed those questions because they gave him a chance to set the record straight. He told one interviewer, "What's the thing people always get wrong about me and Sam? That I was just following him. Truth is, sometimes he followed me too." But nobody writes that down. The impact of Sam Cooke and Lou Rawls on modern stars and musicians runs deep through today's music. Sam's ability to blend gospel emotion with pop accessibility set the blueprint for artists like Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye, and later Usher and John Legend, who all carry his influence in their phrasing and lyrical depth. Lou, with his smooth baritone and mastery of jazz-infused soul, inspired performers like Luther Vandross, Barry White, and even contemporary crooners such as Gregory Porter. Together, their influence shaped entire genres, soul, R&B, and even pop, by teaching that technical skill means little without emotional truth. Modern singers often credit Sam and Lou for proving that music could be both deeply personal and universally relatable, a balance still sought by today's greatest stars. What are your thoughts on the powerful bond and unforgettable journey Sam Cooke and Lou Rawls shared? Share your thoughts in the comments.